All right, so we'll get started here. So my name is Ryan Alleman. I work at the New Holland Hay Tools plant, New Holland, Pennsylvania. I'm the operations manager at the plant, and I've been here 11 years with the company. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about welding today, but I also have with me Greg Gerwitz, who is our welding engineering supervisor in the plant as well. So a little bit about CNH Industrial. Many people don't really know or understand, but CNH Industrial, we are one company, but we have 12 brands. We have 50 R&D centers. We have 64 plants, and we have over 64,000 employees. And our revenue is over 25 billion. We are in the sector of the ag business of that CNH Industrial. So when we look at the ag side of the business, we fall within this, and inside of here we are primarily a New Holland branded plant, but we do build both New Holland brand and CASE IH. Our plant specifically is an implement plant, so we don't have any engines or transmissions, so we make an implement and we fall within the hay and forage sector of the business, and that's shown here. So we're in the baling and crop preparation. We did bring in some of our compact tractors, but we're just doing final assembly on those units. So a little bit about the plant. So the technology we have is fabrication, machining, welding, paint, and assembly. We run 10 unique assembly lines. We roughly produce just over 8,000 units a year, 2018. That comes with 450,000 standard hours that we produce. And we manage over 18,000 unique part numbers to make those assemblies. We are a non-union facility. We have around 63 salary employees that support 410 hourly employees. We have two shifts, a first and a third shift operation, primarily a first shift operation outside of parts making, which is split. And we have a facility that's over 700,000 square feet. Today we're going to talk about welding. So in the welding aspect of it, we have two job classes in welding. We have a welder 6 job class that you can see here and a welder 5 job class. The welder 6 is our highest job class. The welder 6 has a majority of the manpower and resources in it, and that can be anything from a manual welder to an operator that runs a robotic welder. So that person goes through and that expectation is there. A welder 5 is somebody that we actually use and teach to actually make and edit the robotic welds. So we'll talk about some of the different technologies that we have and those things as far as that goes, and what the difference you would expect to see in those welders as we move forward. But that's kind of how our structure is. We have 2 different grades of welding in the plant. Just some basic skills for welders. So what you need to be at a very, very high level of welder, right? The dexterity is important, attention to detail, stamina, right? So we do bend, stand, right? All day you're on your feet, right? It's not a sit down job. It's a very active job, very hands-on. We have to have good eye-hand coordination, and balance and steadiness of the hand are key to be successful. So the one question, Jonathan, you posed to us was, what does a career outlook look like? So did a little research on this, right? So for the United States, right, the career outlook for welding, they combine it in weld cutters, solders, and brazers, but majority of that's going to be in welding, right? Looks like a 5.6% increase out to 2026 with an annual average openings of almost 46,000 jobs, right? We break that down and look at Pennsylvania, right? Our change is actually a little bit higher than that, 6.6% change, and our average annual openings are just shy of 2,000 openings for the job outlook. So very good outlook for the job from that side of it in a state and in the U.S. So some of the things that we do, welding is a very difficult skill for us to recruit for. It's a challenge for us to bring in to the plant. We definitely work very hard at getting the right resources in to be able to bring them in the plant and entertain and get the people engaged. So one of the things we started working on this year, we actually hosted Lancaster County STEM Day. So we had multiple schools from the area. I think we had a total of 70 educators came on site. We did a 3-day STEM event. hosting and manufacturing side of our campus. We also have engineering, and we have our commercial groups. We did a 3-day rotation through that, and it was a very successful event that we had. We also work very closely with our local high schools. So we do tours through the plant. We do manufacturing day. There's some pictures here during manufacturing day every year in October. We bring the schools in. We do more of a hands-on activity. We let them kind of get a good feel of what the job and a career looks like in manufacturing, not just in welding, but in all the opportunities that we have here. And we're very closely tied to our Thad A. Stevens College of Technology that's local here in Lancaster, PA. And we started to work with Penn State Williamsport, right? Penn Tech, I guess, is the actual Penn Tech up there in Williamsport. We've had quite a few graduates come from there, and we're starting to really build that link and connection with them as well. So we looked at PA, we looked at the increase in jobs, right? And that's good. What is it, and how do we do it from CNH Industrial? We look at our PO, our production demand, every month, right? So we look at that from what's commercials requesting for us to build. We review that, we analyze it, and determine our needs from that standpoint. And then we'll go through a posting process. We'll typically post jobs internal and external from that standpoint. So for a welding job, it is a higher pay grade job, right? So we will give opportunity to our employees that are current CNH employees. If they want to become a welder, we go through that process to help them become the welder and meet those goals. And if there isn't any interest there, we need to go on the outside, then we'll go on the outside for applicants. Along with that, we do some agency employees. I would say that's probably the most successful rate that we've had for agency employees for somebody coming right out of school. They come on with us as an agency employee. It might be an agency employee 6 months to a year, and then we have a very high conversion rate for our agency employees, rather than we can make them full-time. How that selection works for our hourly workforce, they come in, they do a behavior-based interview. So we go over that process. We refer to any references they may have posted. And then for welding, we do a skills-based testing. So we'll actually take them out on the floor. We'll have them actually run through some sample pieces of some typical welding that we would expect them to be able to apply to based on their skills that they demonstrated in their resume. And then we'll actually grade that testing. And then we'll finish that up with just a facilities walkthrough before we wrap up the day with them. Once we select the candidate, we bring them in, and then we do a very detailed training, right? So then we come in, and now we've selected the candidate. They start with us, and we go through everything from safety to our environment, our company policies, the employee handbook, job specifics, right? Behaviors. So we'll do feedback from behaviors. We have lean manufacturing, which we call world-class manufacturing here in CNH Industrial. So we go through entry-level training with that, and we go through Kaizen training as well for our operator suggestion program. So that's Kaizens or process improvements. And then we'll go out and we'll actually start to train them on the standard methods for the jobs that they have accepted and come into the plant. Along with that, then we do a 45 and 90-day review for all new employees. So that review is a sit-down review with the manager or the supervisor of the employee. We go through topics like safety, quality, behavior, teamwork, job performance, WCM, and give some feedback to that employee at the 40 and 90-day evaluation period to monitor the employees that we've onboarded. This is a breakout of kind of some of the sections, right? So in safety, right, have they been counseled? Quality, do they have repeat mistakes? Ability to work, or the ability to work with people, right, as well as just by themselves. The pace of work that they hold, the job knowledge, right? We don't expect them to be an expert in 45 days, an expert in 90 days, but are they picking up on the plan, and are they starting to learn every day and making developments? And then what's the engagement in our world-class manufacturing? So with that, we're going to get in a little more detail of welding, which is kind of why we're here to talk. So I'm going to turn over to Greg. Greg's going to kind of walk through what we have. But like I said earlier, one of the things we really struggle with is being able to onboard welders from the outside. So we've actually taken that opportunity to really look and and build a program in our plant to develop our own employees, right, that might not have ever picked up a weld torch, right, in their life, and how we build and develop that and create our own welders inside the facility. So I'll let Greg talk a little bit about that.
All right, so I'm going to walk you through a little bit of our weld processes. And as Ryan mentioned, we really had the need to further develop the skills internally. We were really struggling to bring those people on. So where we start is in a classroom setting. So we're really focused on blueprint reading, all the personal protective equipment, the safety gear that they need to wear from day to day. We cover some basics on how to measure parts with tape measures and other tools. We go over a little bit of basic math and then defect recognition for welding. From there, we transfer into a virtual simulator that we've purchased. This allows us to teach them the proper techniques for welding, which includes the speed that they move at, that they move their hands for welding, the gun angles that affect the quality of the weld, the distance to their workpiece from the tip of the gun. That's an important parameter in welding, and also the audible side of it. A lot of times you can. I'm your assistant, here to help you throughout your day. Here are some things you can try saying to get started. There's also an audible aspect to welding, so you can tell if you're following all those right parameters a little bit by how the weld sounds as you're making it. And then from that virtual simulator, we transfer into our weld booth, where we transfer that knowledge into hands-on. So again, we go over the protective equipment that they need to wear. We recap on blueprints and measurements to make sure they've retained that knowledge. But we also cover our standard procedures for our shop floor, and then it helps the operator calibrate a little bit from that virtual simulated world to what it really feels like with the actual gun in your hand. So the quality requirements that we hold our welders to are developed internally by CNH Industrial. They're typically offshoots of the industry standards from American Welding Society. But that's how we gauge their performance in welding. There's a few images there of just the typical weld joints and what that weld is expected to look like, or examples of defects. So we mentioned earlier in the training, we go through defect recognition. So there's a list of the most common defects, and then we really teach them what to look for those, but also what parameters in those gun angles and the speed that create those defects, so they know how to react and fix that issue. So here's just some examples of the type of welding we have at our plant. So the industry of welding is fairly broad when you look at all the different types and applications. Ours is really honed in on pulse MIG. That's our primary method of welding here at the plant. And then that's broken down. We have robotic systems that we weld parts on. So in total, we have 22 robotic cells. And then within those cells, we have 25 individual arms. The brands that we have here at the plant are Motoman and Fanuc, and they range from around 30 years old to the newest being about a year old currently. We also have manual weld cells. So there's a picture of one of our larger weldments. It's a frame. In overall manual welding, we have about 200 different weld booths. And they range from these bigger types all the way down to small tabletop fixtures that we would have in more of a booth setting of like what you would see in a weld school. Specific for robotic welding and touching a little bit on the math that's related to our part of the business is in robots, the cells operate on an XYZ coordinate system. Some of the technology in those systems that we use is touch sensing, so that it uses the wire to find the joint that it's going to weld to account for part variation. We also use seam tracking. So once that weld joint is found, the seam tracking keeps the weld wire in the joint. Tool center point monitoring is a tool that we use to maintain process control. So that's a way that we check the accuracy of the robot and make sure that nothing has changed in the motors or in the physical geometry of the robot that's putting our wire off the seam where it should be. And then vision systems is a type of technology that we haven't completely tapped into yet, but that is what is starting to phase out the traditional touch sensing and seam tracking. So very fast method. It takes a picture and allows you to do both of those things just using that image. So the way the robots work, they're a 6-axis arm, and that image is showing you what each axis is doing. So if you picture your body from the waist up, right, you twist at your waist, you can bend with your back, and then if you transition to your arm, you have your shoulder movements, your wrist movements. So also the rotation of your arm, but also the bending. With that, we open it up for any questions that you guys have for us.
Okay, does Carly or Jed have any questions for us from West Green before I ask a couple? Okay, okay, perfect. No. So this might be more of a question for Greg, but either or both of you can answer. I understand you go through a pretty scrutinous process in even offering a candidate a position, and by the time an offer comes, you have a pretty good idea that the candidate is a right fit for the company and is going to do well. But what, and I know you showed the graphic on skills gaps, but what do you see as some of the most common things or shortcomings that exclude job candidates from getting hired?
I think a lot of our fallout happens when we take them out to that initial test, the sample coupons that Ryan spoke about early on. So we go through that interview process, and then when we take them out on the floor and we have them do the welding, a lot of times that the results of that test doesn't seem to really reflect what they have on their resumes. I think that's probably a top reason. Anything to add to that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, right, the interview process. We go through the interview process and everything else, but really when we look at the hourly candidates, which on the welding standpoint and as hourly candidates, it's really about the ability to apply the skill, right? So when we're hiring somebody in from the outside, if they're directly out of school, right, we have a level of acceptance for our ability, right? But if they come in and they say if they have 3 years in the industry, right, then our expectation is that really they should have very little training. We know as a company that if they're fresh out of school, they're coming to us, right, they've never really worked in the industry, they haven't applied, they're not going to really know how to weld in production. They're going to know how to weld in a classroom on a sample piece and do those things. But we're going to have to close the gap from the classroom to reality. And we know that that's a task that we have to take on. So our acceptance criteria is lower on that. If they have the basic understanding of it, if they can put a quality bead on our coupon pass, right, that's really what we're looking for right out of school. We know that there's a gap there. It's at times it can be a significant gap, and one of the biggest gaps we see is just pace. I would say that's probably the biggest thing that we struggle with the new hires is the pace of the environment, right? Anybody can, not anybody, but if they've been through some classes in welding and they've done some of those things, if they take their time and they're at a table and they can get the perfect gun angle, right, they can lay a nice solid bead. But when you're put in an environment like we showed in some of our weld cells, right? Like this one here on the screen, right on the right-hand side, right? I mean, he's welding over his head, right? We're using a manipulator to try to get the best gun angle, but it's not ideal. It's not always right in front of you in the what we consider the golden zone, right? And it's not always the perfect application. So it's definitely closing that gap there. I would say is one of the biggest challenges that we have.
So before I get to my next question, on that same note, what recommendations do you have? Because like, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, a lot of our school-based programs around the state do offer welding. And, you know, we understand that this is an industry that's in high demand right now. And I know teachers and their local advisory committees that support their program identify that as well. So what recommendations do you have to instructors of these programs to help you close that skill gap a little bit more before a job candidate gets to you? Because like you said, a lot of classroom welding is done in the traditional booth type setting. What kinds of recommendations do you have for instructors, how they can help you close that gap?
So my thoughts, and some of this is just based off of the experience that I've had throughout my education. So my degree is very hands-on, at least for the first couple years. And the biggest thing that after leaving college I found frustrating, and it applies to production welding, but I guess where I noticed it the most was for pipe welding applications, is that you go through and you practice specific joints in the booth, very much in the positions that Ryan was talking about. It's in our golden zone. It's right in front of you on a table, right at hip level. It's very ergonomic and perfect scenarios. And they did the same thing for pipe welding. And then I recalled visiting one specific school, and they had this full setup where you actually go through and you're fitting up pipe welding just like you would out on a job site. And I think that would be my recommendation, is to have some mock fixtures, things that are maybe up around your shoulder and head level, something that you're having to manipulate around, much like Ryan spoke on our frame weldment. But I think they could duplicate that on a smaller level, and they could fix them in certain positions to make that more challenging to help develop that skill set that would be required.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is if we could, work with the team, if the educators can more try to mimic a production, large scale cell. I think they do an okay job at, we definitely have booth jobs, which we consider booth jobs, table jobs, right, that are that. And typically what we end up doing is starting the new hires in those, because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they've been doing. So we'll typically start them in there, smaller weld assemblies, right? And then we'll spend the time to gradually progress them up. I think if we could start to get some of that earlier in the phase and come in at maybe not ready to go, but we're definitely closer to that point where it wouldn't take as much time from our side to close that gap. And to Greg's is don't weld something that's 2 feet by 2 feet, right? Mock something up that you're having to climb over a frame, or you're having to go around at different angles, or mimic it up where you got to reposition it with a hoist, right? To have that person have to walk through and say, okay, well, I have this large weld assembly. I can't get all to it just pulling the table and flipping it over by hand. So now I have the hoist, and I have to take the hoist and rotate the part and get in the right position for me, and understand kind of how they would work through those things in the real world environment. Because I think that's the biggest disconnect that we see is, if we lay the part out on the table, right, they can do a good job. And I would tell you, we're not 100% successful in candidates that we pass on the weld coupon, right? We definitely have the people that come in, they pass the weld coupon, they get started with us, and unfortunately, they don't make it in the environment from that side. I think also we could do a better job together on helping the candidates understand what a production weld environment looks like. What are the job tasks? How do you go about that day to day? And what is a day in the life of a welder, right? So they don't come in and kind of be blindsided by, well, in school I sat in a booth and I TIG weld all day, and now I got this welding job, and now I'm out here and now it's a high-paced production environment, and they're asking me about how many numbers I get and those things. Kind of the difference is not always about, who is the prettiest looking weld, right? But it's also about the productivity and the throughput that we're getting, right? Just as much as the quality of the piece.
Great. Question from our attendees from West Green High School. Is there a company that you could suggest or that you know of that has a virtual setup as well as a hands-on sort of situational type setup?
So we have that. We have virtual and hands-on that we have as a company, and we show that here. That's what the middle screenshot shows. So you're asking like who you could purchase that from, or who you could work with to utilize one, or what's the details of the question?
Yeah, I think, and correct me, Carly and Jed, if I'm wrong. That looks to be like a Lincoln.
That is. We have a Lincoln, one that we have, and it's fully virtual. Miller makes a fully virtual one now too, as well, right? Or is there still?
Miller's is a mix, so it has the ability to do some virtual, but it also has the ability to use an actual weld gun, an actual material, and put a real weld down. And it uses sensors to provide feedback on what the operator is doing well and also what the operator is doing not so well. We chose the Lincoln because it saves on the material cost. So you're paying for steel, you're paying for gas, you're paying for weld wire, and then all the time that it takes to set all that material up to duplicate the coupons that you're trying to weld. So then you're paying somebody to tack parts in preparation for training. That's one reason why we chose it. It also seemed to be a little more flexible to fine tune it down to reflect what we would typically run on our shop floor. Both of them have their pros and cons. If you were looking at them, they'll come out and do trials. You can also rent them for periods of time. I would recommend trying them both and see which ones you feel would fit your curriculum the best. As far as I know, those are the two options, but we haven't looked at it for probably 5 years now.
The thing I really like about the Lincoln that we have, and I'm sure the technology is better and everything improves every year, but from a classroom standpoint, even from our standpoint, is Greg can be right there, and he be working with Bob, who's new to welding, right? And maybe I'm new as well. I can watch on the screen exactly what Bob's doing, and Greg can then turn back. He can replay that same virtual weld to us, showing the chart, but also showing the physical weld gun angle and all those things and the audible and all that. And he can re-coach us on, okay, see, Bob was doing good here at this point. Now here he went off seam, or here his stick out's too far, or those different things. And we can work as a classroom to do that review. The downside I find to the Millers and those things is it's hard to gain more participation than just one-on-one or even just a personal. I think that's the opportunity that Lincoln gets you, and we don't get any credit for Lincoln, so don't get me wrong on that side, right? From that standpoint, but I think that's one of the strengths it offers you is it allows you to get more feedback, more engagement in a group setting. When what we've seen, our engineering shop has a Miller one over there, and it's very much a personal. You go in a booth, you work on that, you do a review of it, but there's not the very close tie between the two. So that's our ability. I mean, if there's local schools, right? I'm not exactly sure where you guys are located in the state, but we've worked with when we bring the high schools through, we let the students go and run the simulator. We grade them out, and then we put the professor on it, and then all the students are all excited because they scored higher than the professor, and I'm sure they take that back for bragging rights for some time. So, but if you're local, we're more than open to bring you in and kind of help you walk through that process, or if you decide to get one, right, and you have questions on how to set it up, because it does take some learning curve on setup. We have the guys that can help with that.
So again, a question for either one of you. it's no secret, there's a lot of publications out there talking about the retirement of the welding workforce and the projected and already seen shortage of welding supply to fill that retiring workforce. It's also no secret that there's it's a fairly lucrative way to make a living. Especially of course, economic factors at play, but depending on your skill level, the level of certification you've obtained, and so on. But what do you see as, or what are the things that you see or know of as the barriers to folks entering the welding industry, seeing as though there is such a high demand for it and it's not a bad way to make a decent living?
I think that last statement, in my opinion, with the groups that we get through the plant, and don't get me wrong, we don't have we're not tied into the high schools or that every day, but is we need to get that out there. That communication needs to be clear that it's not a bad way to make a living, right? There's such in my opinion, a bad local manufacturing. People think of it's manufacturing in the 30s. Well, I can tell you we're far from manufacturing in the 30s, right? Can't speak for every manufacturing plant in Pennsylvania, right? But we have a great facility here. We support 400 hourly employees. They all are able to support a family on the salary, the income that they take home from the jobs. They have good benefits packages, right? It's a really good way to make a living. And like you said, the pay is there as well for the skill, right? So I think it's more of not shying so many people away from a manufacturing job. And I think if we look at, what we've done is we've pushed some people away from that. We've scared them from manufacturing. And I think we need to do a better job of really educating the students and giving them the options, giving them the opportunities, right, to explore. And that's why we've really tried to host some manufacturing days with our local schools to get people in the plant, get them in the door, let them talk to a welder, let them talk to an engineer, let them talk to some of our supervisors, and see what does a day look like in manufacturing, and really get that exposure from that standpoint. So we try to take every opportunity we can to build that. That was one of the great things that we had the opportunity with the STEM event that we did, that we hosted over the summer. It was with the educator level, right? Our goal out of that was hopefully those educators are going back and they're sharing that with all their students, and we're able to touch the up and coming workforce and really help to at least let them make the decision of what they want to do from that standpoint. And I think one of the big things that we bring, right, in manufacturing is opportunity, right? So whether you come in as a welder or an assembler, right, there's always opportunity for growth, right? I can't speak for other local manufacturers or local production, but from our standpoint, we are really strong on developing our own. So that's where Greg was talking about, taking an assembler that, they want to make a better living, they want to be a welder. We'll train them. We'll put them through the classroom, the virtual, and we'll do those things and give them that opportunity. So my opinion is it's closing the gap in what manufacturing is today, in 2018, soon to be 2019, and what it looks like and the opportunities that the individuals have.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Ryan. I was going to say there's a stigma out there, and it's been there for the last 10 or 15 years, that you have to have a 4-year degree to be successful in life. And that's just not true when it comes to skills trades. And the growth opportunities are huge. I mean, the president of our North American sector started out as a machine shop machine operator. So I think the limits are endless. It's all about your personality, your drive, and setting goals. And I think, for just thinking back to all the videos and things that I recalled going through my courses, it's always seems to be outdated 1970s films where you've got a guy in a dirty, smoky environment with these dark-looking overalls on, right? If you were to walk through our shop, it's very bright, it's very colorful, It's a very visual workplace. And I think everybody would be really surprised to walk through our shop and realize that that's what a welding environment looks like in 2018.
Another question from our guests from West Green. Do you have an example of how we could structure the welding classes in a high school program, such as a scope and sequence for those classes?
I think we do. I think we could take our training plan, right? And don't get us wrong, we have no idea how to write a curriculum for a class or anything like that, right? That's not our expertise standpoint. But we have a people development section of the plant that really is structured around that, is how do we develop people. And what we do is we put together kind of what I've shown here. It's on the screen, so the classroom, virtual, and then hands-on. We have that in a 7-step approach to learning, right? And what we do is we ran through multiple iterations with, the first round, the first candidate to the second to third of, we have written documentation what we're going to train the employee on, a test that they're going to take and pass. We have criteria for the virtual, and we've laid that out that we could help and work with and provide information. What do we test them on? What questions are we asking, and those things. I wouldn't have the knowledge to be able to tell you the first step in building that into a kind of a classroom curriculum, right? But we could definitely help with the data that's behind that.
Yeah. The other thing that we use that for is we solicit feedback both from the student, the end user. So in our case, it's the supervisor that receives that person in his area. We monitor different quality network. We check quality on our assembly lines. We monitor that, and we take all that input and we manipulate our curriculum to try and do better on those specific feedback items on the next round. So it's a living curriculum that's constantly being updated.
I don't know if you guys can see the chat. They just asked if they'd be willing to share, if you are able to share, so that they can kind of have a guide to follow as they're forming their scope and sequence for their welding program.
Yeah, we can work on the documentation, what we have, and go through that. So I'd say if somebody's interested, Jonathan, if you just share my contact information with them, and we can get in touch after this and the beginning of next year, and we can kind of work together to see what information we can provide. We don't have anything there that we need to hide from our standpoint on what it is. So we'd be willing to work with that.
Absolutely. I can share Ryan's contact information with anybody that's interested in chatting with him. My final question is a fairly simple one. Are there any certifications that you look for or hope to see a job seeker have? And do you know of any of those that are possible for a high school program to assist students with obtaining?
So we don't require any certifications for our welders. Obviously, we like to see them that are on there, but we don't require anything. The requirement is a GED or high school diploma in order to get even an agency position with the plant. But we don't require any of that. But in order to come in as a welding candidate for a job, you need to have some type of welding on the resume, whether that's a VOTEC class, you've gone through VOTEC welding, or you went to Thaddeus Stevens and they have, some welding programs that you get. I don't know that you're fully certified when you come out of that, but it's kind of a general welding job class, right, that you can kind of come through. But we don't require any. To be honest, I don't know that we have any that we'd pick out. But one of the strengths that we've really started to do is trying to work with the high schools on co-op opportunities. So probably the most recent hire we had was actually a co-op. So we started their senior year with that employee, and we came through and we did a co-op with that employee. They went to school in the morning and worked for us in the afternoon. They did that for, I think it was 6 months. Then they graduated high school. We flipped them over to an agency employee, worked for us for, again, I think it was like 3 to 4 months. And now, right, we're happy to say they're a full-time employee for us. So.
Yep. And just to piggyback on that, so I'm just reading through some of the questions on the chat. Since we're in the agriculture business, what would really stand out to me as a certification that would really excite me to see on a resume would be certs to the AWS 14.3, I think it is, and that's their agricultural equipment weld standard. But honestly, I get excited when it's to that base certificate level that Ryan talked all the way up through to the very specific AWS welding certifications to their different standards. It tells me that you already have the skills. Are you going to necessarily fit our business? Maybe not. But it tells me that you have skills, that you're teachable, that you put effort into the work that you do, and you care about the work that you do just by having any certificate that's out there. But the 14.3 would really be the one that I know of that's out there that would really apply to our business the most. That's what our internal quality standards are, offshoots of what AWS has established in that standard.
Okay. Any other questions for Ryan and Greg before we kind of wrap up here today? Okay, I'm gonna kind of steal the screen sharing for a second.
Do you need me to stop sharing? No, there you go.
Nope. So for our educators on the webinar today, pulled out some relevant AF&R national program quality standards that are pertinent to the discussion here today. This is relevant to applying physical science and engineering to design and implement improved safe and efficient mechanical systems, applying physical science to metal fabrication using a variety of welding and metal cutting processes, operating machinery and equipment safely, utilizing manufacturer's guidelines, troubleshoot and diagnose, determining structural requirements, specifications, and estimating of costs, and following mechanical plans. The FFA connection to today's discussion, the Agricultural Technology and Mechanics CDE incorporates many activities and skills that Ryan and Greg addressed today, and that CASE New Holland seeks in its job candidates, such as welding, cutting and bending metal, brazing, oxy-fuel welding, as well as cutting, and also some basic fabrication principles. And I believe it was Ryan mentioned co-op, supervised agricultural experiences, perfect way for a student that's interested in pursuing a career in the welding manufacturing, industrial manufacturing field, would be to try to get a summer job, do some job shadowing, perhaps as an immersion SAE project, as well as doing an entrepreneurial SAE if the student has any interest in opening their own metalworking welding business, and then also restoring old farm equipment as an SAE project would certainly help develop those sorts of skills that we're talking about, helping industry fill those gaps with those skills through SAE. And with that said, does anybody else before we finish up here today. Anybody else have any questions for Ryan and Greg? And let me just say, this has been a fantastic webinar to end this Connect to Industry series for the fall semester here. So thank you to both of you. You did an absolutely fantastic job, shared some great information. And as I said, we look forward to continuing to develop a partnership with CASE New Holland and help our ag teachers through your knowledge and expertise, and also help your industry by helping prepare your future workforce. So thank you. One final call for anybody that has any questions or comments for Ryan or Greg. Okay, and with that, go ahead, Ryan. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So it's been fun. We always like the chance to talk to and kind of explain what we do and the gaps we have, and how we can get better, right, from that standpoint. So we look forward to any future events that we can help you with, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, if we can do an event like that STEM Alliance that you did with teachers, a couple of our graduates from our program took part in that, and they just absolutely loved it. Said it was some of the best professional development they've ever had. So we'd like to share the wealth around the state, so to speak, and help the welding industry out as much as we can. So, all right. With that said, thank you again to Ryan and Greg. I will remain on till everybody has signed off.